Welcome to Accounting Life with Jotham Tai, a space where we'll talk about anything and everything surrounding the people that grind through your month-end accounting close.
Hi, everyone. Today's episode is Independent Consulting as an Accountant. And we've brought back one of our favorite guests, Natasha Castelli, founder of Apta Consulting Group. Sorry, Natasha. Welcome back. I'm going to hand this over right away to our host, Gapify CEO, Jotham Tai. Hey, Jotham.
Thanks, Carmen. And hello again, Natasha. Great to have you back on another episode.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, today's topic is just as cool as revenue accounting. So I know a lot of us accountants in our careers think about different pathways. And you heard me mention this before. I think what's great about the profession is it gives you so many options to choose from many different paths. The path that I want to ask you about today is one that's familiar to me too. It's going from, a normal full-time job to independent consulting. And some would call it a plunge because there's a lot of risks associated with it, but I would really love to learn from you, what the benefits are. And for those that are considering this type of a change, what to look out for.
Sure. Yeah. It's a big topic. So, I think the nature of accountants is we tend to be risk adverse. And, I consider myself in general population, I would say I'm risk adverse, but within the accounting population, I'd say I'm, bold and a leap taker and all of those things. And so certainly becoming an independent consultant is a leap. It's definitely, it can be scary. And I think a lot of people, get nervous with the idea of not having secure income, but there's so many positives from it too. So I guess maybe I'll start with how I sort of made that big decision. So I was, on the last podcast we mentioned, we worked together at Responsus and I was working there. Great team, amazing culture. I loved my time at Responsus. That being said, I was working, 55, 60-hour weeks consistently. I did not have a single 40-hour week in the year and a half that I was there. And actually, that's a lie. I did, but I took 2 days off that week.
Nice.
Not the same.
And I just remember saying, I just want one normal week. What would that be like to have one normal week? And I remember sitting there and I had hired an independent consultant who was amazing, who was not a revenue accountant, but I just needed help and I needed someone that was good. And I said, I know enough revenue. I'll tell you what you need to know. Just ask questions. She was great. And she had done independent consulting. And I watched her leave at 5:00, go down, and I had a window spot. And so I saw her get into her car and drive away. And it was still light out. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. And so that, that was kind of an inspiration for me. It's like, let me try it. And I kept thinking, I'll do it in the future. I'll do it in the future. And then it was just time for me to sort of close the chapter at Responsus. And my husband and I were thinking about moving. And I said, let's see if we can make it work and go for it. And so, Responsus was my first client because there was 1 or 2 projects that I wanted to help wrap up. I gave plenty of notice. I gave 2.5, 3 months notice. And I took a 3-month little break to recenter myself. I taught kids how to swim. It was amazing. And then the fall hit and I said, okay, it's time. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's make this happen. And it did. So yeah, that was the big sort of moment that I took the leap was, I was ready to move actually was, geographic again, that I wanted to move up to Hillsburg, which is where I was from. And I thought consulting might be a way that I could do that and give me a little more freedom and autonomy and sort of control over my schedule.
Well, Natasha, the way I kind of talked myself to do the jump, and I'll share my story in a minute, but just connect the point with what you just made. I thought it was less risky when you actually broke down the components of the decision. I know it's risky because it's not the traditional path, but I don't know if you did this, but I'm an accountant, so I actually did a spreadsheet, pros and cons.
Of course I did a spreadsheet.
Guilty. I'm so guilty. I don't know if I should be proud or be disappointed in myself. So I kind of broke it down, right? It's like, on one hand, you don't have a recurring paycheck. The other, and I think we talked about this in the other episode, I like the camaraderie of being in a company, right? And the team and the vibe and all of that. On the flip side, you have the financial benefits of being a consultant. Obviously, I think people know in the profession that you get compensated higher as an independent, a contractor or a consultant. So I went through the list, and I think the main thing for me, Natasha, was if consulting doesn't work out, like how was the job market at that time? Like, would I be able to find a full-time job? And to me, the answer was yes when I made that decision back in 2004, a long time ago. So that's kind of what like prompted me to take that leap.
Yep, I think you're spot on. And I think that's true for most accountants. And it's certainly true for revenue accountants that there's worst case scenario, I go get a full-time job again. I mean, that it's not that big of a deal. And I think as accountants, I don't want to say it's not hard, but it's usually there's jobs out there.
Is accounting in this world in general a very secure job? Like you just said something I haven't heard in the marketplace at all. Like worst case scenario, I'll just go get a full-time job.
Yeah. I got my job at Responsis in 2011, which was arguably, the bottom of the Great Recession.
Right.
I had 3 offers when I took that job. And I actually was able to negotiate because of it. People brought their price higher. And so accounting in general is a very secure profession. And then I think revenue accounting, and maybe there's other specialties that are this way too, but in my experience, revenue accounting is even more so that way. Not to say it's not going to be challenging for some people, not to say it doesn't take a long time for certain people. I've known people where it's taken a while, but generally speaking, the jobs are there.
Yeah, wow. I'll add to that too, Carmen. So I've been in the profession now this is my 20th year. What I've seen be true is that the higher up you go in your career path, that the more job security you have. So, if you're a controller, and especially in this market, goodness gracious, it's off the charts, like a lot of demand. It is. Yeah, I guess I've never thought about that too, Carmen. Like I can always go back to a full-time job. It's not something like every industry.
No,
really
I mean, usually
says.
you hear that about, medical, right? Like if you want to have a secure job, always be in the medical field, but you don't, this is why this is such an interesting podcast. It's just giving people more information that we really don't know about the accounting world. And one of them, that's a big pull. It's a secure job. It's huge. We
talked about the stereotypes of who an accountant is, and in reality, how we see so many different personalities. For me, the common denominator is actually that sense of security around job, around finances. And that's why I think it is so hard for accountants to take that leap. And it is why Jotham and myself sort of represent the risk takers within accounting, which is not true of the general population. You line up 10 people, and I am definitely not the biggest risk taker, but within accounting, I might be.
Yeah. Well, and, even the ones, especially the ones outside of the profession that are your loved ones. So I'll just quickly share my story with how I made the move. So I was at KPMG at the time, and that was when Sarbanes-Oxley and, Enron was first mandated. So I was talking to a client. They had a team of 10 contractors that were just firing questions away about like, why am I in audit? And so they convinced me that there was opportunity on the other side. I told my mom that, and my mom cried. I was leaving a stable Big Four job, and she's like, Joe, why are you gonna, and my dad obviously was disappointed too. He's like, why are you gonna take the risk and start your own practice and be on your own when you have an amazing job? But again, I think I thought I went through a very methodical and rational choice, and definitely no regrets. But it's such a big decision, right, Natasha? It's a life impacting decision. So if people are going through this same decision today, whether you're in audit or maybe a controller that's been around for a while and wants some flexibility, like what would you have them, like what components of that decision would you have them focus on the most?
Sure. I'll first say that I think for some reason there's an emotional attachment to medical benefits. And I think people get really scared. Well, what do you do about benefits? That's a question I get a lot. And let me tell you, insurance is expensive and it's annoying. It's very annoying. And I just, Yes, it's annoying, but you can buy it. There's a number associated with it. And when you do your spreadsheet, you include that as a number. And what you'll find is that you'll very quickly pay for that with the difference in your compensation. So think of it as a number. You can buy insurance separately. It is more expensive and it is annoying, but it's a number. So I'd say that would be number one. And if you happen to be in a partnership where the other person has great insurance, all of a sudden that kind of gets off the table, which is nice. That was my situation, so that made that question easier. It wasn't my situation forever. My husband became an entrepreneur too, and so we no longer have that. But that certainly made it easier. And it was for me, talking to my partner and saying, okay, this is what we have in the bank. This is how long it's going to last. We had his income, and we did an evaluation of how long could I make no money, and would we be okay? And we looked at that timeline, and I said, okay, well, that's my timeline. This is how long I have to make it work, and I think I can make it work during that time. And so when I left, I took a couple months off because I was burnt out, and that was great. Mm-hmm. But I also was able to take responses as my first client, and I didn't. I did have an opportunity to continue there in a more full-time way with a consulting relationship. I opted not to do that to make the break a little bit cleaner. And I only took on 1 or 2 small projects, which was great. So I had a small source of income as I was sort of rebooting. And then, within 3 months, I said, okay, let's do this. And my timeline that I had given myself was 6 months. And in those last 3 months, I was able to get clients. I was able to network. I was able to make it happen. So, and I guess as an aside, when you're putting together that spreadsheet, I chose to go direct to potential clients. You can go through recruiting firms, and there's always recruiting firms calling. They will always be able to place you. It's just, they pay quite a bit less. So that's something you might want to think about. Do you want to use consulting firms? Do you not want to? Or, like subcontract or not? That's kind of a strategic decision.
Yeah, I definitely had a preference for direct as well. But actually, one thing, if you're thinking about doing independent contracting down the road, is start building those networks now, right? Because that's what drives your ability to get new projects and jobs. Mm-hmm. And then when you get to a certain point, they won't stop coming back to you, and you'll have to say no. But obviously, a lot of that groundwork happens earlier. So if you're thinking about a career in independent consulting, start strengthening those networks now.
Absolutely. And just stay in touch with people.
These are life skills for anyone making a career change, by the way. I just want to throw that in there. I know you're speaking specifically in this industry, but everything you're talking about, even the spreadsheet that you said, I wish more people would do that, like the pro and con list. That is something that anyone making that kind of change should kind of consider. This is great stuff.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that to the audience, because I think what Natasha and how you brought it up, Natasha, in a very methodical accounting way, by the way, just planning, right? You don't just make this decision and, as I used the expression earlier, take the plunge. There are components to this decision that you need to gather, collect, put on a spreadsheet. And part of that is working out personal finances, figuring out what kind of runway you have, so to speak. So I think going through that thought process is critical to getting comfortable with these decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so that's the planning side. And as we wrap up here, just if you were to sell why independent consulting is great, what would those points be? And I'll start with one. And I think this is the obvious one. I'll just let the cat out of the bag. Getting paid hourly is much better than not getting paid hourly, right?
Absolutely. They're well, because I think in accounting you work overtime, and that's the standard. And I always felt like high performance in accounting got punished with more work, and we're paid a fixed amount. You do a good job, you get more work. And now as a consultant, if I do a good job and I get more work, I get paid more for that. And if a client says to me, hey, I want you to redo that, if my previous me would be like, are you kidding me? I spent 3 days perfecting this, and now you're giving me new information, and I have to go back and redo it, and this is not time I'm getting paid for. Now, if that happens and a client's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I gave you the wrong report. I'm like, no problem. I got it. We can do this again. No big deal. And I really don't mind because I've already done it once. It's going to be easier to do it the second time. And they're paying me hourly. So it feels like the reward system is in alignment.
Along those same lines, Natasha, did you always get the sense that you were kind of above the fray in terms of like the office politics? Like that's one thing I enjoyed, like, whatever people were positioning themselves to be to get a promotion, like I felt like we were kind of like not part of that, which is awesome.
Totally. I mean, I think there's pros and cons to that because I think you had alluded to in our previous podcast, the camaraderie. And so there's something I that's the hardest part for me actually, is not feeling like I am part of a team, and not feeling like I'm in the trenches with my team in that same way. That being said, when there's politics going on, you can sometimes people want to vent to you, some people want to talk to you, and you can just put a smile on and be supportive, and you don't let it faze you. You can kind of just keep it a little bit at arm's distance.
Carmen, on that point about camaraderie, there were some cases and I did independent consulting for a while, where the accounting team went out for karaoke and I didn't get invited, Natasha, and that stuff hurts.
Oh,
and you know how much I love the karaoke, right?
Yes, we used to karaoke all the time. It was amazing. Oh, well, we should just start an independent consulting karaoke group is what the solution should be.
But you know what? I think what happens just from the industries that I've worked in and the people that I've worked for, there is a mindset, and I think this is what this podcast is kind of changing, hopefully, at least for me it is there's an idea that accounting people are kind of outside of the company. It's almost like sometimes lawyers as well. It's like lawyers and accountants, they're just outside. They're not part of our creative world or part of our, minutia of every day. And that's actually not true.
Well, yeah. And this episode further, so there's, the standard that you mentioned there, which is, yes, there are like accounting organizations that don't feel like they're part of the overall organization because we're just kind of the folks that are crunching the numbers. But then in this episode, we talk about the independent contractors within that accounting group. So they're even like that
Even
much
further
away, which
Absolutely.
is the toughest part about, I think, to your point, Natasha, that is definitely one of the toughest part about being an independent contractor.
Yeah. I mean, there are certainly clients where I've worked with long enough now that I've sort of developed a little bit of that camaraderie, but it takes time. One of my first big clients, I was pregnant with my first kid, and they gave me a little mini baby shower when I went to leave on maternity. They bought a couple outfits, and it was sweet. And so that does sort of come back in time, but it takes a long time to do that, and it's not quite the same. It's a little bit different. So. Yeah, but I guess that's not one of the positives. So the positives that you don't get involved.
Out, and as we do wrap this up, Natasha, let's close this out with your number one reason for selling the opportunity of a contract.
So I have two because I can't limit myself to one. But so one of them is obviously the autonomy. I mean, even if you get to a place where you are unhappy on a particular client or you're working a bunch of hours, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's within your control. You can say, hey, I'm going to finish out this project and then I'm going to move on. I'm going to close out this particular thing and then I don't have capacity going forward. So there's a way more autonomy. You can take less time in the summer if you want. You can take more time. You can take off, way more autonomy. So that's one huge one. And then I'd say the other one is actually in some ways counterintuitive because it's hard transitioning to a new company all the time. And you're the new guy all the time, right? You're learning new systems. But it's actually really interesting and fun to learn about all these different companies. And it's always challenging, very dynamic, always applying, sort of your skill set to a new scenario and then being able to impact change. People need help. And at the end of the day, you're able to come in and say, I've got this, no problem. Let me take that off your plate for you and deliver them something. And their work life is better because you were there to provide that service. So I'd say it's actually kind of rewarding in that way.
That is so true. That last point about just the level of appreciation, I think might be higher or just as high with being a contractor because you're being hired there when people need help and they need
you. Yeah.
So you help them get caught up. You're all of a sudden like a hero to the whole accounting team, which you don't know sometimes get just checking off boxes on your month-end close checklist.
Totally.
Wow,
Yeah.
this has been amazing. I learned a lot, and I keep saying that at the end of every one of these podcasts, but it's true. So I just want to say thank you again, Natasha. I appreciate
course.
meeting you and learning so much from you. And again, Jotham Tai, I'm so glad that you're doing these on a regular basis. I look forward to our next episode together. And everyone who's listening, thank you for stopping by. And I hope you'll continue checking out our episodes on Accounting Life with Jotham Tai. If you want more information, please check us out at gapify.com. And we'll see you again next time. Bye, everyone.